G'day, I'm Mark Berg. This week we head to the ocean edge of Sydney. In the heart of this thriving metropolis, there is the unavoidable need for speed. But just beneath the water dwells a fish with a need for weed. Seaweed, that is. Our man Alex Bellissimo, rock fishing guide and all-round legend, is going to show us the ropes on how to target this interesting little omnivore.
Blackfish, what a wonderful fish, what a wonderful resource we've got. We are truly privileged. Sunday morning, midday high tide. Oh, it's no good for this species, no good for that, because the tides aren't right. I'll go for a blackfish. The blackfish are on fire, middle of the day, how awesome is that? Go down, have brekkie at 9 o'clock in the morning, start heading down, and you've got a midday 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon high tide. You can get down there and you can be back well before dark. You didn't have to get up early, you didn't have to fish till late, right? And you're actually taking advantage of that high tide. How sensational is that? You've got this marvellous sports fish, robust, beautiful species they are. Always check out the ocean conditions, the wave conditions, to determine whether or not it is safe enough. So even though it appears to be safe enough now, it may not be safe enough to be able to fish in 2 or 3 hours' time as the tide's rising. So therefore you check out your location, you check out the time of the wave that's actually coming up to that specific area, and you go, I'm not going to fish that location, I'm going to go to a plan B or a C. So then you go to another location, you go, okay, it's not quite as rough here, there's not much weed growth here, and then you can even go to a plan C and go, okay, I'll go to this spot here, it's quite calm, but also you can see the actual weed growth on there, and that looks like a likely place to be able to fish. So when I'm looking for blackfish, I like a deep water location, preferably with at least 3 metres of water. That's a typical blackfish spot. I like some white water there. And the white water, which is produced where it first came from, was the runoff, where the wave came up on the rocks over the weed patch, and then it's running back into the water, and there's waiting blackfish there for you, okay? And you can fish afloat at your variable depths there. Otherwise, if you're fishing a spot that's actually exposed at low tide, and it's only, say, 1 metre deep, those locations also produce very good blackfishing. On the rocks itself, you'll see short weed growth, and the actual blackfish come up and graze on that short weed growth. Okay, so the rig for blackfish is a float, long stem float, and these long stem floats can be of variable sizes, which means that you can put on a more sinker weight compared to another. I like to have ball sinkers ranging from a 00 up to about a 2 ball, depending on the float, if the float can actually support it. Then you've got a swivel, very small swivel of about between 20 and 30 pound, a length of about 50 to 60 centimetres of fluorocarbon leader. Fluorocarbon, look, you can use mono if you want to, okay, but fluorocarbon is great, it's less visible. Roughly 8 pound fluorocarbon is all you need. A size 6 to 10 sneck hook, suicide pattern hook. Choose your hook, preferably something that's not of a long shape type version, okay? So keep the actual shank quite short. A fairly robust hook as well. Now the length that you have between your swivel and the float can vary depending on the depth of the water. So the depth of the water, if it's say 3 metres, you have it set at about 2.5 metres. Now, if the float is getting snagged, okay, you lessen your depth. If the float's going sideways, it means that the actual rig itself, the hook, the sinker is scraping on the bottom and you need to shorten that length up, okay? You just keep shortening it. Shorten it up a bit more, shorten it up a bit more. Don't shorten it up to a point where you actually started at 2 metres and then you're going to 1 metre. Shorten it just in increments of say 20 or 30 centimetres. I might nearly be able to get away just lifting out this fish. Ooh! Oh, look at the size of that! Wow! Look at that! That's about 1.2 kilos, easy. Look at that. I reckon 1.2, 1.3. I'm not exaggerating, by the way. That's my biggest blackfish for a while. Very pleased. Ooh! Oh yes! Bit of fish. Okay, now when it comes to bait and burley, make sure that the spot that you're actually getting bait from is legal. I've already touched on that. The bait that you actually harvest on the rocks is either the hareweed or the cabbage weed. You don't need to grab big, huge handfuls of it, just get what you need. The only reason why you've got a bait container is because the weed that's actually near where you're fishing is not available. It saves you walking 20 metres each time to go and get a cabbage bait or a bit of hareweed. So you just got it there available when you need it. That was awesome. It took about a 5 metre run. So this is what happens in nature. Wave comes up, dislodges a bit of weed, and it floats back into the water. It floats around in the suds, in that oxygenated water, and as it gets out of that oxygenated water, it goes down, it planes downwards. As it's planing downwards, it looks completely natural. Now, after a blackfish has done this hundreds of thousands of times, and then old mate with his blackfish gear starts drifting his float out and it looks jerky, the float starts going sideways because you're actually dragging it on your end, it's tight. The float goes sideways, it means that you're dragging it. It means the bait looks unnatural, therefore the blackfish becomes even more timid or won't even bite, right? You can fish for half an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and you go, the blackfish aren't biting today. But then you get another person that fishes correctly, no resistance, the float's just bobbing around, and there's no resistance, and I've got the bail arm open and I'm feathering the line out. Every time the line goes too tight, I'm feathering out more and more line, gradually, only in increments. The float goes under, you click over the bail arm, give it time, and then strike. Your hookup ratio is much better. The blackfish didn't even know. You've got to make fishing like that. The fish doesn't even know that you're there. That's what it's all about. You've got to make things look as natural as possible. Otherwise, if they know what's going on, well, there's a good chance that they won't bite. Even if the fish has never seen a hook or sinker, they go, no, that looks unnatural. It is a privilege that the fish even bite our baits. So just take into account that it's a privilege that they bite our baits, just for the sheer fact that you're doing something right. You give yourself a pat in the back. The fact is, right, I'm doing the right thing. Now, if you can keep repeating that over and over, you're fishing correctly for that species. That's what it's all about. 27 centimetres. Remember, we're fishers and we're hunters, okay? So have those hunting instincts and realise that the fish aren't a country mile out, literally. You don't have to cast out a mile. They could be virtually at your feet. So from the actual rock ledge, that's what I mean, virtually at your feet. And they could also be 20 metres out. So when you're drifting your float out, scan and find the fish. Go, okay, I'm drifting out here, the float's drifting too fast. I'll go to the edge of the wash and slow it down a little bit. So your float might be drifting too fast, which means that you get less bites as well, by the way. Slow it down. If the fish are right in close, that's where you fish. There's no point in drifting your float right out wide and then realising that the fish aren't really out there. But the fish will vary. Blackfish move around a lot. They'll just keep moving around and they'll go out far and they'll come in close. Scan and find the fish. A bit of beach sand, right? A small bucket, like a honey bucket, perhaps only a kilo of beach sand. You get your hair weed or your cabbage weed and you chop it very finely. Just snip, 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 very, very finely. And then you get the actual weed together and you rub it together, which grinds it down because sand's abrasive, so you can rub it down even more and more. And you'll find that the actual sand gets like a green tinge to it. That is exactly what you need. Bellissimo. You need to have weed on you. So you've got one container with weed, another container with your burley, and then you burley up. You've got to have enough common sense that when you get to the rocks, you check out the wave conditions and you go, it is not half a metre, it is 1 metre plus. I'm going to use some common sense and I'm going to move to another location. Sometimes the weather forecast is just incorrect. Look, you can give or take 50%. Sometimes it can be 100% incorrect, but you just move to another location. Some locations are safe in a 1 metre south swell, where it's fairly safe, but in a northeast swell, it can be very dangerous, in a 1 metre northeast swell. So you've got to actually use your common sense. If the waves are coming straight into the actual spot, it can be more dangerous than an actual waves coming around a headland, which then you are fishing the lee of the area, and the actual wave height is much smaller than what it is on the actual eastern front or the southeast front. So you've got to take all this into account. Use common sense. Check out the wave conditions. Check out the period between the big waves and the small waves, also known as sets and lulls. Avoid fishing the high energy areas where the actual waves impact into that area. Fish more the low energy areas. You know, at the end of the day, no fish is worth losing your life over. You know, a calculated decision from an experienced angler is far different than a so-called calculated decision from an angler that's not very aware of rock fishing. Just be patient, because fishing is a game of patience, all right? And there's always another day. Say you caught blackfish in 1 metre of water, you caught it in 1.5, you caught it in 2 metres of water, and you caught it in 3 metres of water, and you go, how sensational is that? You caught all these fish in all these different areas, and it completes you as an angler when you're fishing for that species. You go, I really hunted for that species correctly. You know, I just love it. I never get bored with it.
checking out look at that, checking out the lens. That's
Oh my god, he's so cute.
I'll carry it back to the bush.
Yeah, do that.
I've never seen one of these.
Beautiful little guy. Oh, look at his belly.
He's getting a bit restless, so I need to let him go.
Say hello to him first. Hello, little buddy. All right, mate.
Oh, that was in my cut then.
Now you're going to get one.
Yeah, take him up one.
Alex figured out how to juggle that little echidna, but it's fair to say his Luderick handling is far better. Finding this little guy roaming around the car park of one of Sydney's busiest beaches is a good reminder of how healthy this coastline truly is.
You're not fishing on a public wharf, you're not fishing on the beach, you're fishing on the ocean rocks. So safety is paramount. So regarding hooking a fish, your float goes down, you wind up the loose line, you can let the rod tip just bend over just a tiny bit, then you can strike on that, just a good swift strike. If you're missing fish, you may need to strike a little bit sooner, because they might be picking up the bait and spitting it, or you might be striking too soon. So you'll find out over a duration of time whether or not you need to strike sooner or later. Ooh, ooh. Okay, now you've hooked up to your blackfish. Your rod's roughly at between 45 and 70 degrees. You've got a nice bend on the rod. It's not about scull dragging fish, it's about playing out the fish. Often if you actually scull drag a fish in, you're more likely to pull the hook. Remember, it's only a very small hook. It can only, if it's only a fairly reasonable hookup, it can actually tear out of its mouth. So don't load it up too much. Have a well set drag as well, where on an 8 pound line, you might set it at, say, approximately 2 kilos. You know, the only time you wash up the fish is when it's on the surface, laying on the surface itself, when it's flat on the surface. And then I'll wait for a decent wave to come over and I'll just wash it up. Essentially, you're just body surfing up a fish. Wash it up, your back's to the water only for about 2 or 3 seconds. You immediately turn around, look at the ocean, rod's underneath your arm, and then you pick up the fish with your cloth or your hands, but you're looking at the ocean. You're spending all your time looking at the ocean. Test yourself, right? Give yourself a kick up the butt when you're not looking at the ocean. The rod and reel I select is the Daiwa Sandstorm 12-foot 2-piece. It's a 4 to 6 kilo rod, beautiful rod, very sensitive, very responsive on the tip. Mate, that rod you can use literally for any small species. Matter of fact, you can land some big fish on that rod. Beautiful rod. It is a dream to hold. It's so light. It is an absolute dream. Now, 12 foot means that you're going to stand well away from the actual edge. Now, the actual reel itself, the Saltus Nero 3000, beautiful, beautiful reel, very smooth, silk smooth. And the BG 3000, beautiful reels. Mate, these reels are just magnificent. They're so smooth, they're such a dream, they're light. The braid is 8 pound J braid, very nice, very fine, and very tough as well. Quite a small run now. Oh yes, better fish. Oh, little trevally, look at that. Hey, woo, it's all happening. 30 centimetres is legal. This goes back in. If you've never tried sashimi before, 32, 35 centimetre trevally is incredible sashimi. It's a must. So once you've caught your fish, you might decide, well, should I release it or should I keep it? I'd like to take a photo of 6 blackfish and then release 5 of them and keep 1. I might want to keep 6 of them, but keep them alive as long as possible. Keeping them alive means that you can release what you don't want. Luderick are a strong, robust fish and they stay alive in a pond. Look, providing that the pond's well oxygenated, it's quite clean as well, and it's not too warm for them. Take some happy snaps, great, release them quickly. What a great way to take care of our resources. You know, you can keep catching that same blackfish time and time again. Your mates can catch them. Another person can keep catching them, okay? And they can also breed again, and our resources will last much longer that way, okay? Great tucker, sensational. And hey, weed, how easy is that? You just pick up a bit of weed off the rocks and you just go home with a big smile, you're grinning, and it improves your ability as an angler. There are specific species that will improve your ability as an angler. I recommend taking up blackfishing. Love it. I'll be fishing for blackfish when I'm 80 years old. Hopefully I'll live till 80, right? 80 or 90, and I can barely get down to the rocks. If I can't get to the rocks, I'll catch them in the estuary. What a sensational fish. Just love it.
Bellissimo! Woo! How good is that? Ludwig heaven. I've gone to Ludwig heaven. This is amazing. This is where all black fishermen go in the afterlife. Cast after cast, blackfish.
You can chase Ludwig on weed or bread, off the rocks or in an estuary. These stunning little fish are not only great sport fish, but are a treat on the table. Alex Bellissimo has certainly got them wired, and I hope you've learned as much from this as I have.
My girlfriend would be very, very jealous.
You like it, you can try it.
That's so good. No.
Two more, dude.
No, you keep it to yourself. You're very, very kind. What is your name?
Sam.
Sam, Alex.